Namibia's sound economic policies continue to enjoy favorable international recognition. Both Moody's and Fitch ratings have reaffirmed Namibia's credit ratings with stable outlook Baa3 and BBB- respectively. These ratings denote expectations of low default risk and continue to contribute towards achieving competitive borrowing terms both domestically and internationally. In the area of the overall competitiveness of our country, we should remain cognizant of the remaining challenges to economic competitiveness and persist to address them. The Global Competitiveness Index of 2012-2013 ranked Namibia 92 out of 144 countries, lower than the 83rd rank achieved in 2011-2012. We need to work harder in areas of policy and institutional reforms, streamlining government administrative procedures, and reducing red tape in order to improve our attractiveness. Namibia ranked satisfactorily on 4 pillars, namely macroeconomic environment, institutions, financial markets development, and infrastructure. Promoting financial inclusion and modern legislative environment. As part of promoting the financial inclusion agenda for Namibia and implementing reforms in the financial sector, government will develop a monitoring and evaluation framework during 2013 to guide the implementation of the financial sector strategy. Legislative reforms in the banking and non-banking financial sectors will also be undertaken. Expenditure priorities for the MTEF. The funding priorities in this budget and the next MTEF are as follows: economic growth, employment creation, and poverty reduction. In order to reduce poverty, the economy needs to grow and to create jobs at an accelerated rate. Structural change is also needed in the composition of growth if policy intentions are to translate into tangible results. To this end, additional resources are provided for in this MTEF. To agriculture, a total of $7.1 billion is allocated over the MTEF. The resources are to fund expansion of the Green Scheme project, to bring more land under irrigation, to strengthen animal health and productivity programs, and horticulture development and construction of grain storage facilities and veterinary clinics. For environment and tourism, a total of $1.8 billion is allocated over the MTEF. The resources are to fund, amongst others, community-based tourism development, development of tourism facilities, and implementation of environmental management and adaptation activities. In accordance with national development priorities, $8.2 billion is provided to the transport sector over the MTEF for, amongst others, expansion of the Port of Walfish Bay, rehabilitation and railway infrastructure management, and development and maintenance of national roads infrastructure. The National Airline Company also receives additional support to maintain its operations. I must emphasize that the perpetual lifeline extended to Air Namibia is a cause of concern for me as much as it is for the nation. A lasting solution, I agree, is warranted in this regard. Energy is critical to fueling national development and industrialization. Additional budgetary allocations are therefore made to promote provision of secure energy for industrial and households. With regards to water, provision of bulk and potable water remains a core priority to ensure adequate supplies for households and industry. In this regard, an amount of $1.1 billion is allocated during the MTEF for rural water supply and strategic water supply infrastructure development. The major projects envisaged are the construction of the Nekarta Dam in Karas region, the Walfish Bay desalination plant, and water extension pipelines, as well as earth dams. Private sector development and initiatives for diversifying the economy. The adoption of the National Industrial Development Policy provides a national blueprint for the diversification of the economy and to address domestic supply-side constraints. Government is currently seized with a review of Namibia's incentives regime, whose conclusion will form part of the programs of action for industrial development. Human resources development and skills formation. As a nation, we have accorded top priority to education. Education receives the lion's share, amounting to some $10.7 billion in 2013-2014. This amount corresponds to 23.7% of the total budget. Over the MTEF, the allocation to education amounts to some $35.2 billion. The allocation to education will fund, amongst others, provision of universal primary education, improvement of accommodation facilities for teachers, expansion of hostel accommodation, especially at institutions of higher learning, and increased funding for the Namibian Financial Students Assistance Fund, as well as vocational training loans to cater for increased access to these institutions. For the health sector, increased funding is provided to improve health facilities and to bring health services closer to the people. Over the MTEF, allocations to health amount to $15.4 billion. The main activities funded comprise strengthening disease control and prevention, as well as clinical health care services program, improvement of health facilities and recruitment of personnel, and sustaining program activities previously funded by donors. Social safety nets. In this budget, resources are made available to strengthen the social safety nets, both in quality and quantity. An amount of $3.9 billion is allocated for old age pensions over the MTEF to cater for increased coverage of our senior citizens, as well as to cater for an increase in the monthly grants for our senior citizens. In this regard, in addition to the increment that was provided already under this MTEF of $50 per month, there is a further increase by another $50 to increase the monthly grant to $600. Allocations are made for emergency relief owing to impacts of natural disasters and climate change, and resources are made available for the support programs to the veterans of our liberation struggle. Allocations to the national defense are mainly to cater for upgrading the facilities and enhance Namibia's participation in peacekeeping missions as part of the United Nations membership's responsibilities. Allocations to the police are to cater for constructions of new police stations, accommodation facilities, and recruiting and training new members of the force. $546 million is allocated for the administration of justice, construction and renovation of court structures, and reducing the backlog of cases in our courts, and $587 million is allocated to prisons and correctional services. During this MTEF, allocations to youth development and empowerment programs are strengthened to promote entrepreneurship and ensure that our youth develop their talents and that they always remain at the center of development. Last year, our nation shared in the joy and triumph of Namibia's golden girl, Johanna Benson, for clinching the Paralympic gold medal. We should continue to discover and develop the talents of our sportsmen and women to their fullest potential. During this MTEF, allocation to the Youth National Service, Sports and Culture for the MTEF amounts to $1.9 billion. As part of this allocation, funding is provided to the National Youth Credit Scheme to support young entrepreneurs who want to start income-generating activities. Further to these allocations, the increase in allocations to the Namibia Students Financial Assistance Fund and Vocational Training Loan Facility is aimed at encouraging more youth to access tertiary and vocational training institutions and thus enhance their employability. Housing and improved sanitation. The provision of housing and basic sanitary amenities is an important priority to improve the living standards and quality of life for our people. It is on this premise that His Excellency President Hifikepunye Pohamba constituted a national task force on housing to propose a long-term model for addressing this national problem, focusing on core factors of land acquisition, servicing, property development, and financing solutions. A total amount of $1.9 billion is allocated to the Ministry of Regional Local Government, Housing and Rural Development for 2013-2014 alone, to cater for, amongst others, the servicing of land and improved sanitary standards in both urban, peri-urban, and rural areas. Over the MTEF, the total allocation amounts to $5.8 billion, reflecting the urgency for and consistent action to arrest the situation. In addition, a total of $320 million is allocated to NHE over the MTEF to provide for the construction of low-cost housing. Allocations are also made to support Build Together, social housing, and related programs.
The Minister of Finance, Saara Kuugongelwa-Amadhila, tabled the appropriation bill for financial year 2013 to 2014 at Parliament here today. However, the opposition parties have indicated disappointment in the increase of pensioners that has only gone up with 50 Namibian dollars.
At least to increase the pensioners' pay to at least 1,000 per month. That would at least allow them to buy a bag of maize meal and some relish. But 600 is really peanuts, and it's a very big disappointment.
The money provided for the elders' pension is very little. It's the only one I'm disappointed on.
My first impression is this, that I am continuously an advocate of old age pension, that there must be an increase. And an increase of $50 to $600, where I've been advocating 1,000. But given the world situation, the economic world meltdown, well, we shall accept that. Secondly, the growth, our growth, which is pegged at 4%, having dropped from 5%, and juxtaposing it with the developed countries, such as the United States, Japan, China, that are growing at, the recovery is at 3%. Then we are doing well in sub-Saharan Africa.
We have just heard from the opposition parties on their feeling and their first impressions of the budget. My name is Sawi Hausiku Lutivezi, reporting for NAMPA News, WINDHOEK.